I've noticed that everybody seems to want to bring you some incredibly boring PowerPoint show. And I am determined to bore you incredibly in an entirely different way. So with that, I'd like to start out, and as you've probably heard, Morse code, or as we hams call it, CW, is a combination of long sounds and short sounds, which is true, but it doesn't necessarily have to involve radio or sound at all. For example, maybe you did this back where you in Boy Scouts. Okay? No radio, no sound, but those of you who know this at all could probably copy that perfectly. But typically, what we do is we hear some kind of sound out here. And I'm going to see if I can minimize this a little bit. It's been fighting me today. Okay. So let's start out with a little bit of CW here. Now, who among us learned CW so long ago that you had to do it to get your ticket, but you haven't really used it since? Okay, good. In that case, W8JFQ. Let me see if you can identify this CW sound. You know what it is? No? Anybody? CQ. That is probably the one set of Morse code that everybody, every ham knows, well, almost every ham recognizes, without actually having to do it. And it's not so, and the incredible thing to me about CQ is that we've been doing this for so long, we don't even remember what CQ means anymore. Some people think that CQ means I seek you, and that's a kind of a contraction, because everything in CW is shorthand. And there's another school of thought which says it's the French word sécurité, which is a way of hailing other ships when you're out at sea and you're inexplicably speaking in French. And there's a couple other theories which are even less likely. But everybody, who has somebody who can tell me, what does CQ actually mean? What's that? A general call? To do what?
No, originally it was shortening from the first SOS, which was Come Quick Danger.
Come Quick Danger?
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying when we call CQ?
No, but that's what it came from.
Just listen to it. I can send these two letters over and over. CQ. And what does that really say? It says, can you hear this? Are you out there? Can you hear these long sounds, these short sounds that I'm putting out there? Because if you can, this is an invitation to come talk to me. I don't know who you are. You could be on any continent. We don't know each other. But let's have a conversation. And if you recognize my long sounds and my short sounds, you'll be able to talk to me, and we can talk about just absolutely anything. Tell you what, let's have a conversation. I'll start the conversation. Let me tell you my name. My name is WB9LBI. If you are anything about radio or Morse code at all, these long sounds and short sounds tell you exactly who I am. If you know anything about amateur radio call signs, you know that I have to come from one of 3 states in the American Midwest. You know that I had to have been licensed somewhere in the early 70s, because that's when they were issuing that call sign sequence. You know that I have to have been around for quite a long time just to know that. And you can tell by the speed and the accuracy that you hear me sending my fist exactly what kind of radio operator that I am. And there's another big advantage about when I took my last test. They said, are you going to change your call sign? Because most people, when they get the extra, they say, well, I'm going for that old 1x2 call sign. And I said, no. Here's why. Listen to that again. WB9LBI. That's not it. This is it here. It's got a nice rhythm to it. Da 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 da. It just flows right off the key. It just sounds very rhythmic, very melodic. You know, and LBI spells out my name, Bill, if you're not too picky about it. And I'm not too picky about it. And I'll tell you something else. There's a lot of Bills out there. There's a lot of people named Frederick, even with my weird spelling of my name. But the entire history of mankind, there's only one WB9LBI. In every civilized country in the world that recognizes amateur radio, by this license in my pocket, acknowledges that in the entire history of mankind, I am the one and only individual who has a right to sign that call. And it's all in those 6 letters. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And that's something I don't want to give up. This is the one room where I think everybody in here understands exactly how I feel. Because, like me, you had to go and up to the FCC and sit for your test. You had to study. You had to get materials. You had to travel. I went to Chicago a couple of times when I was a kid because I flunked it a couple of times when I was a kid. And after all the study and all the effort and having to pay the fees and put it all down and have the travel, finally that steely-eyed FCC examiner said, yes, you have the right to call yourself an amateur radio operator. And then the US government, no less, they are the ones who officially gave me this name. Listen to how I spell it, WB9LBI. And if you come and you answer my call, we can talk about anything. I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you where I live. I'll tell you what I do for a living. I'll tell you everything about my station. I'll tell you how old I am. Anything. And let me give you an example. I only see one person here who is not actually a ham. Glenn, could I borrow your XYL for a moment? Could you step up here, please? Because I don't think most people properly appreciate what CQ means. And if you answer my call, it's going to be like this. Hi, my name is Bill, and I'm an amateur radio operator. My call sign is WB9LBI, and I live in Streetsboro, Ohio, and I'm running 100 watts in an ICOM 718 right now. And your signal, wow, it's wonderful. It's 599. And I've been a ham for 45 years, and I'm 59 years old, and hey, would you like to have a conversation? No. I'm talking to my ex-wife. See, if you were to do that in any other context, in any other venue, they'd probably put you away for a psych eval for a couple of years. But here in this room, in this community, in amateur radio, it's common, it's expected, it's international. Wow. How did we get that way? And the amazing thing is that we got this way because of a painting. No kidding. I've got that painting right here. Let's see. Okay. If I can get the slide to change. Who wants to come up here and help me? Because I can just sit here and talk about nothing all day, and pretty soon I'll start going up into amateur and make the code. And let's see here. Maybe go this way. There we go. Did I mention that I work with computers for a living? Yeah. And I've been doing these PowerPoint presentations for years. This is the painting. This is the guy. Please meet the hero of the American Revolution, a fine military strategist, a French nobleman. I'm going to try to pronounce his name, Marie-Joseph Paul Yves Rolf Gilbert du Motier de Lafayette, the Marquis de Lafayette. If you know anything, if you move a little farther west, like Indiana, where I'm from, there's names Lafayette everywhere. You've all heard of Purdue University, right? West Lafayette, Indiana. And there are streets, and there's towns, and there's all sorts of schools, and they're all named after this man for the great service that he did in founding this country. And he was being honored in the year 1825 at the inauguration of John Quincy Adams, the second president Adams. He was in town for that organization, and they wanted to do him a big, big party. So he had this painting done. And they didn't get just any old portrait painter for this. They got the Norman Rockwell, the Andrew Wyeth of his day, a very fine, very famous painter. His name was Samuel Finley Breeze Morse. And he went and painted this, and he was about halfway through it when suddenly he got a message from home. The message simply said, "Your wife is convalescent." And he immediately stopped his painting. This message had been delivered by a horse messenger. And he caught the next ship back to Connecticut from where he was from, so he could be by his wife's side as she was sick. He got there as quickly as he could. He was too late. By the time Samuel Morse returned to his home in Connecticut, his wife had been dead. Actually, she had been buried for about 3 days. And Morse was devastated. Because he could have gotten back in time if he had gotten word in time, but everything moved so slowly. There was no regular mail in those days. There was no real other means of communication. The mail they had was very hit or miss. If he had been known just a little sooner, if only he had a little advance notice, if only communications was somehow faster, he could have been home for his wife's side before she died. And now you understand the motivation behind the invention of the electromagnetic telegraph. That was it. Faster communication. Morse, being an internationally famous painter, went to Europe. While he was in Europe, he was starting to look around at the various great European things of the day, and some people were experimenting with electricity. And there was a man named William Cooke who actually had already invented a magnetic telegraph, and he had done that. I know you don't know the name of Cooke, but maybe you know about his collaborator, somebody named Wheatstone. Everyone here has heard of the Wheatstone Bridge, right? That's one of the things you have to know in electricity. That was this Wheatstone that helped Cooke develop an actual telegraph, which is kind of wired up around Cooke's backyard in England. And at that same time, in a different country, I believe it was Germany, Wilhelm Weber. You know the name Weber? We say it's Weber, and we use it to measure magnetic fields. As we also do his collaborator, a man by the name of Carl Gauss. And Gauss was perhaps the finest mathematician that has ever been known on the face of the earth. Gauss and Weber got together and they did their own version of this telegraph, but it was a multi-wire telegraph. It was complex. It did not span distances very well. It was complex for its day. It was expensive. But it got Morse to thinking, and when he came back to the U.S., he had a long time to plan this out, and he actually did all of his planning on that ship on his return to the U.S. He worked out the means for the telegraph, he worked out the means to organize messages, he worked out the means to actually read telegraphic messages. He had it all down, and all he needed was a partner. And he got a partner in the name of a young man by the name of Alfred Vail. Vail thought this electricity stuff was just wonderful. He really, really thought it was great. He invested his money. He got his father, who was rich, His father owned a large company called Speedwell Iron Works in Massachusetts. And this was the first place where they had set up their equipment. And long before the sentence that you heard, the very famous sentence that was ever transmitted, called, what was the name of that? Like, what hath God wrought? Which was transmitted from Baltimore to a distance of about 40 miles. Long before that, they had the single wire, the simple, the easy, the economical telegraph set up in the Speedwell Iron Works. So I thought you might like to see what it looks like. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the kludge. That's not what they called it, but it was a kludge, as we will see. Right in here, you see this wheel? That's for a strip of paper. Here was the idea. If I have a telegraphic message, if I have some communication I want to send, I give it to you, the telegraph operator. You've got this book, and it has all sorts of phrases in it which are translated to 4-digit numbers. And what you're supposed to do is try to take apart the message and compress it down using these 4-digit numbers, and then you send it with a standard telegraph key. And once you send it with a standard telegraph key, what happens is that at the other end, there is this strip of paper, and it's being operated by a weight that's actually underneath the table, pulling it down like a clock. And there's a pen that sits there and puts down these marks on the paper. And then once you have a message, or you think you have the end of it, you tear off and you read it just like a ticker tape, and you translate the long marks and the short marks into these digits. And you take the digits and you compare them to your book, and you reconstruct the message. And does that sound like an easy system to you? No, that's really what he had invented. And it was not going well. He was trying to get Morse and Vail were trying to get people interested in their electronic telegraph. And they looked at that and they had exactly the same expression on their faces that you have on your faces. It was, no. We're not putting up any development money for this. I don't think it's going to work. I don't see how it's very useful. It takes too long. It's too complex. So, something simpler came along. And that would be the telegraph sounder. In fact, if I can find my, let's see if we can play this here. I swear I had a mouse I could see yesterday. There we go. Who can copy this? Now, to be perfectly honest, I think that Morse and Vail probably had a different grade of alligator clips in their initial try. But here's what happened. These people who were working with him and working on the kludge, the thing that drew lines on paper, what they found out is after a while, they got to be able to recognize the sounds of that. It's difficult for us. But if you listen to it for a while, you could. I'm sure everybody here could pick out the rhythm of CQ, right? And if you gave it some time, you would be able to pick out all the other letters and anything else that was said. And that means that you don't have to translate something from a book into numbers. You don't have to put it down on paper. You can take someone with a telegraph key. That is also Vail's invention right there, the telegraph key. That piece of equipment is virtually unchanged The manual telegraph key is pretty much unchanged since the version that Vail invented to this day. I mean, you can get them in brass, you can get them all gussied up, but basically that's it right there. It's the same thing. And what people realized is that you don't have to have all the equipment, and now it's even simpler and even faster. And more importantly, if you're looking for a government contract, even cheaper. And this is the original form that got into production as it became popular with railroads, to be able to transmit train orders. Matter of fact, who here lives in Streetsboro, Hudson? Tim, you do, right? Okay. So if you know Streetsboro, Hudson, right behind where the Step 2 factory is, between the road between Streetsboro and Hudson Aurora Road, right where the rail tracks, that area is called Moran Station. And I found out that Moran Station is named after Robert Moran, who at the time was the telegrapher at the railroad station across Hudson Aurora Road right there. That area still bears his name. He was essentially the Streetsboro town telegrapher. And if there is still an opening for the Streetsboro town telegrapher, I'm going to claim it. Hundreds of years, 150 years later. By the way, when new telegraphers, and there were whole schools for telegraphy that came up, when new telegraphers came and started their professional career, they had some trouble copying this too. So here's what they did. They take the top of a can for chewing tobacco, something like that, tobacco can, and they'd stick it behind the sounder so they'd have a reflector. And the lid of this can basically became the reflector so they could hear it better. Well, the old-time operators thought this was a distinctly new guy trick, and these people were completely incompetent for wanting to have to even try this. And they had a name for these new guys in their tin cans. You know what that was? They were lids. That's another holdover from 150 years ago that we, the amateur radio operators of America, we are the only ones who remember that. And we still use it to this day. Perhaps to some of the people you have here in this room. So let's not put too fine a point on it. So the practice of telegraphy over wires grew and grew. So then, let's see what else we have. So Morse was very, very well known. I mean, we remember his name today. Everybody knows what the Morse code is. Even people who don't know it will recognize it. And Morse never really got rich from it, though. He wasn't really a businessman. I mean, he made a small living from it. He was very famous, but was not he was no railroad tycoon, even though his invention was essential for the operation of railroads. And his partner, Vail, got so disgusted from the lack of commercial success that he sold his entire interest, and he had financial interest in Morse's telegraph company, for the princely sum of $600, and he left the business swearing never to get involved in telegraph again. He was completely done with it. However, we still remember Morse. Has anybody ever seen this statue? This is actually in Central Park. And that's Morse standing there. He has his hand out on the pedestal. Do you see what he has his hand on? That's the kludge, the Vail sounder. You can see the strip of paper kind of coming off the edge of it. And when they dedicated this statue, there was a big, big ceremony. And this was probably the first nationwide network conference ever. What happened was, in New York City, Morse himself had written a message to be sent to all telegraph operators everywhere. And they hooked up they set up rooms, they set up places where these telegraph operators would meet, sit there and celebrate and actually watch this message being transmitted. The original plan was that Morse himself would do it, but by that time he was really old and really feeble. But he was able to get down to New York for this celebration, the unveiling of his statue. And so what happened is they brought out this young lady who was an excellent telegrapher, and she sat down and transmitted most of the message. And then when she got down to the very end, Morse kind of toddled over and sat down in the chair, and then, in his own hand, he signed it, Samuel Finley Breeze Morse. Imagine yourself a telegrapher of that day, very highly respected in your community. And you're sitting there, and on a table in front of you is a sounder. And you can see that sounder move. And that sounder is being moved as you watch by the father of Morse code. Well, I was impressed anyway. And by and large, Morse code was obviously the right choice for the next avenue of communication, and that, of course, was radio. And radio, as we started out, oops, I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. There we go. Radio, as we know, we started out, was simply on and off. The very earliest radios, or other transmitters, were spark gap transmitters. Now, I don't think people properly appreciate spark gap transmitters today. So let's see, whoops, come back here. Let's see what we can listen to. If I can get it started. So let's see, I can operate complex computers and radio and telephone equipment, but PowerPoint kind of has me flummoxed here. Okay. There we go.
Here's a spark gap transmitter I built. A transmitter like this would have been originally built around 1910. Right here is the induction coil. That's a 2-inch Mesco coil. Spark gap. The key, that's a railroad telegraph key. The spark helix, and underneath the helix is the glass plate condenser. And I have this thing hooked up to some batteries, and it's ready to go.
That's exactly what it sounded like on the air. Easier to copy, though, than the click, click, click of the sounder, isn't it? Imagine yourself listening on the radio, and what you're copying is essentially this farting noise coming out of your radio over the air. And it was more than that.
Here's a spark gap transmitter I built.
Stop it, you've had your chance. So what happens is that not only did you have this strange noise, this strange rude noise, but it also took up the entire band. You didn't need to tune or anything, because it was everywhere. You hook that up to an antenna, and basically what you're doing is you're creating your own modulated QRM. And besides that, you know, all your power is all over the band, and this was one of the reasons why it was so difficult to get anything done in early days of amateur radio, or the early days of radio at all, and that was because, you know, your power's all over the place, so you don't have that much range. You remember the story of how the American Radio Relay League got started? It was Hiram Maxim was trying to buy tubes for his brand new radio when he wanted to send a message up to Springfield, Massachusetts, which is about 30 miles from Hartford, where he lived, and he couldn't get through because he only had about 10 to 15 mile range. So he cleverly arranged an entire network of people who could meet on the air and pass messages back and forth. They could relay from one station to the next station to the next station. He had a whole organized network going on. He called it American Radio Relay League. And that's how the league got started. Because of these things right here. So the problem is that not only are they on although by the way, they also, you're basically arc welding, so you're wearing these contacts out here, And for a really big transmitter, the entire B plus of the entire transmitter is going through that key. So you're sitting there pounding brass on that key and you're getting big sparks, and it's amazing you don't get electrocuted right there. A better method needed to be invented. And with the coming of tubes, a better method came up. And that's this one right here.
This is my 1929 style TNT transmitter. I built this about a year ago, using as many old parts as I could find. I'm using a Type 45 tube in the transmitter. Over here is my power supply, using a Type 80 rectifier. I'm getting about 400 volts out here for the plated 45. This is 2.5 volts AC for the filament. So I'm going to turn this thing on and give you guys a little demonstration. If the filament's lit up, I have a receiver in the background here, so you guys can hear the signal. It looks like that thing has drifted off frequency.
Darn the luck.
Let's try that.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Now notice that warble in the signal. These transmitters are very sensitive to vibration. So this transmitter should always be on a shelf, a table, or somewhere separate from the operating position. So I'm going to move my key over here to another table. Notice how much cleaner that signal is. These things are also very sensitive to hand capacitance. Another reason you shouldn't be very close to the operating position.
That old Heathkit, that old Heathkit novice transmitter of yours is looking pretty good now, isn't it? I think one of the reasons, he said that the problem that he had with the sound of it, the warble, he attributed to vibration on the table, but I don't think that's true. I think the fact that it's using AC for the power supply in those tubes probably was pretty much most of it. And we are amateur radio operators after all, aren't we? So, for the longest time, this was the only way of doing radio. So if you wanted to be a ham, you learned the Morse code. And by the way, one of the things they didn't mention is that isn't quite the Morse code that you heard there that they would have transmitted back in the spark gap days, or even in this chirpy transmitter days. That's called a chirp. And that's basically frequency stability, probably due to lack of good power supply. They would have used American Morse code, which is what the telegraph operators used on the railroad. American Morse code didn't actually have just two symbols, it actually had three. The letter T was like 2 dashes. It was an extra long dash. And I've always was wondering, why was it that if you go out and you get one of those bugs, remember the guy from Viberplex, remember he had a presentation from him? And James, you were admiring that bug of his. If you've ever seen those, you hit one side, there's a little pendulum that goes dit, 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 dit. But if you want the other side, the da side, you have to do it manually yourself. You don't have another pendulum. And the reason why is that for American Morse code, that doesn't work. You need to have that longer sound, so you have to do it manually. That's the only way that you can possibly do it. So anyhow, people began to communicate themselves in Morse code. And this is, if you have answered my CQ, This is probably about the way that something I would typically say to you. I tested this on my son last night. He's a ham, but he's a technician, so he keeps arm's length from Morse code. And I said, "Can you read that?" Well, the short story was, no, not in a month of Sundays, he can't read that. But this is exactly how we would express ourselves today in Morse code. Anybody have trouble copying all that? Here's the #1 rule of Morse code. Since you got to spell everything out by hand, everything, absolutely everything is an abbreviation. So the first one, GE, good evening. TNX, thanks. Now that everybody has this texting on their telephones, I don't have to explain nearly the number of these things that I used to. For those of you who are now looking and texting your telephones, not paying attention here. The next one, FER. Why would we change one letter? Why? Well, because O is da, 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 but E is just dit. It saves you about that much space, about that much time, but that's what we do, to save every little piece of time and space and having not had to hit that key as often as we possibly can. So far we have thanks for call OM. And as you probably all know, OM means old man. And, no matter if when I was 13 years old and I got my ticket, I was an old man. On the other hand, some of you here, Kristen, will forever be young ladies. Why else? And I have a woman who was a participant in my nets. She is 82 years old. She's a regular participant. I think she taught Marconi Morse code. And I make a point of always addressing her, YL, young lady. Boy, it's one of the areas of ham radio that women really have the advantage here. Okay, you probably guessed that one, your. RST. Usually we say signal strength, but and if you're on the phone, if you're on the sideband, you usually say you're a 5.7, you're a 4.8, or whatever you are. You have this RST means received signal, reception signal in tone. So the last number is any number between 1 and 9. And the reason we have a number for 1 and 9 for tone, well, you just heard it. Da, 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 da. That's not a good tone. So we actually rate people so we can tell them, your transmitter's getting chirpy, your signal's full of AC, there's something wrong, go fix it all, man. And next one, FB. The Universal Acknowledgement for all ham radio operators. FB, it means fine business. You don't hear this nearly as much on phone as you do on CW, where you hear it all the time. And what you hear all the time is people just doing it to death. I send them a copy, they say, fine business on your signal report, fine business on your QTH, fine business on your mother-in-law choking on a bone. On and on and on and on it goes. Okay, op. That's the operator. My name is Bill. I think we've established that. QTH, that's one of the Q signals that we all know. There's absolutely no reason to use Q signals on voice, but we do it anyway. Why? I don't know. It's just tradition, like old man. And one of the things I do, just as, again, to save a few letters, I live in Streetsboro. Do I tell them I live in Streetsboro? S-T-R. No, I say Kent. It's only 4 letters long. It's close enough they don't know the difference anyway. Hope you guys in Kent don't mind. If you do, too bad.
It's right on the border.
Right on the border, right. Maybe I'll split the difference and say Twin Lakes, huh? So anyhow, so QTH, I say Kent, OH, so once again it's Ohio. The next 3 words you can probably copy yourself, right, is the IC718. It's probably the cheapest, least sophisticated shortwave rig that you can get. Works just great for CW. Plain old, inexpensive rig and a 400 hertz filter. Boy, you are in business. You don't need anything else. Okay, PWR, that would be power. And 1 TTW. We substitute T for 10 for 0. So instead of saying I have 100 watts, 1 TTT space W. 100 watts. Now you know how much power I'm running. All right, ANT, antenna. You know what that antenna is, G5RV, I don't have to explain it to you. WX, that is weather. HR, here. The next one's fairly self-explanatory. That's CLDY, cloudy, 62F. By the way, if I was talking to something domestically, I'd leave off the F. And I leave off the F because you know what 62 is. If I say cloudy and 62, you can figure that out. I'm a radio announcer, for heaven's sake. You should be able to figure that out from the tone of my voice. Cloudy and 62 at WGAR. Here's your marine weather forecast within 5 miles of the Lake Erie shore. So, but if I'm talking internationally, and internationally means even just 60 miles north of here in Ontario, I always put on the F because 62, if I said temperature is 62, that's about 140, 130 degrees Celsius. It really doesn't get that hot around here in Northeast Ohio. Let's see, SRI, sorry, QLF, we'll get back to that one. And for some reason, everybody seems to want to end their QSOs with, how copy? You know, can you hear me okay? Did you miss anything? Do you need any repeats? That's just what we do. And then we send the call. DE, which means from, that's probably one of the letters. If you know CW, there's a certain combinations that you instantly recognize as words in that letter. CQ is one, DE is another one. And my call, AR is actually not 2 letters separately, it's 2 letters run together. It's a pro sign. For example, for those of you who deal with Aries or races, you know about weight, over, Wilco, things like that, pro signs. These are CW pro signs. AR means end of message, and then K means over to you. So in that brief space, I've said, good evening, thanks for the call, old man. Your signal strength is 579. Fine business signal. The operator is Bill. Location is Kent, Ohio. The rig I'm running is an ICOM 718 with a power output of 100 watts. The antenna I have up is a G5RV. The weather here in Streetsboro is cloudy, 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, QLF. QLF is my very favorite call sign, and it means sending with your left foot. And if you take any of these Q signals and you put a question mark at the end of it, you essentially turn it into a question, which would be, are you sending with your left foot? I know some of you think I'm kidding, I'm making a joke, but this really is a Q sign. Here, I'll prove it to you. Whoops, wrong one. Congratulations, most people don't pick up on it.
They're pretty flat, too.
So, I'd like to thank Rick, K8CIV, for letting me videotape that at his house. No, it's an actual QSO. Are you sending with your left foot? I tried to find one with an actual left foot, but this is the best I could do on YouTube. By the way, there's all sorts of great videos on YouTube. I stole this entire presentation off YouTube. So obviously there are many better ways of sending with your left foot, because one of the things you want to do if you invade a Morse code is you want to send well. You want to have a good fist. You want to sit there. Let me give you the one piece of advice which I think you can use for Morse code. Maybe there's more, but we'll start with this one. If you have a straight key, the original plain old Morse telegraph key, anyone will do, don't sit there and do this. Get your elbow down on the surface and use your entire arm. The action should be like that. That's the way to do it. Otherwise, you fatigue your arm, you fatigue your wrist. That was a big problem with commercial telegraph operators, is they would get carpal tunnel. They didn't recognize what it was, but now we know it's carpal tunnel syndrome. They were constantly doing this all the time. Even some of them which did this all the time and constantly was banging on their wrist. And they say that being a telegrapher was a young man's game. because they would wear out their wrists and they had to get out of the business and go do something else. So finally, there was a calligrapher who did something about it. And what he came up with is a system where instead of having to bang this up and down all the time, you could just press left and right. One side, the short sounds, the other side, the long sounds, and the spaces in between, probably the most important. Those are called paddles. Matter of fact, he had to come up with his own paddles. And let's take a look. They look something like this. Watch how he kind of squeezes in the middle of those things. I can tell you that that right there is a lot easier than up and down, and it's a lot faster too. A good set of paddles, or a straight key, and you're in business and learning Morse code. I was going to bring an oscillator that was sold by MFJ. It's a very simple telegraph key. It's got a 555 base oscillator again with a couple of knobs for tone and volume. And golly, where could I get such fine MFJ products, do you think? You have any ideas, Parky?
Yeah, we still carry a few of them.
They still carry a few of them, good. But let me tell you, who here has an HF rig that was made in the last 20 years? All right. You already have a built-in code oscillator into that rig. Just look in the manual, turn the power down to 0, plug in the key or the paddles, and now you got yourself your very own $1,500 code practice oscillator. Works great, doesn't drift. Congratulations. So, if you're interested in learning Morse code, and this is what I think is one of the greatest things about it, you don't have to spend any money. You've already spent $1,500 for a code practice oscillator. You can't afford to spend any more money. So what you really want to do is you want to get yourself 3 pieces of software right here. And these 3 pieces of software are free for the download. Probably the best one. And for those of you who remember, some time ago I did an on-air Morse code training course, and I used this piece of software, which was run by G4FON. So, let me see if I can dig it up here. I was going to have this open, but I was wrestling so much with the PowerPoint coming up here. There we go. Just Google download G4FON, that's Gulf 4, Fox Oscar November, and what you get is this piece of software right here. You tell it how many characters you'd like to start out with. 2 different characters. Start simple. We're going to start out slow, say at 10 words per minute. But we're going to space it out for 15. Okay? 10. Yeah, that's about right there. Okay, good. And then all we have to do is say go. Whoa! Sounds just like your radio, that $1,500 oscillator, doesn't it? Here. Here, we don't need any of this stuff. Much better, huh? So you can crank this up and make it as challenging as you want. But here's what you do. You get a pencil, you get a piece of paper, you get this software, you turn the settings up, you press the start button. And it starts out by giving you 2 letters. Don't look at it. just copy down the letters. And do that till you have those 2 letters full. Then you can stop it. And then what you can do is give yourself more letters, as many at a time as you want. Hit the start button. And it will build you up until you have all the letters, all the numbers, and 6 different pieces of punctuation. And once you've got that down, then it starts offering you more options. And the options it will start doing, stop. Stop. It's too enthusiastic. Once you get up here to everything, then it'll offer you whole words. Or it'll offer you pre-canned QSOs. Or you can come up with your own text files. Grab any little piece of text and have the system read it and get yourself some random piece of text for you to copy and practice on. And it takes about 24 hours of study, I think, to learn the Morse code. If anybody here knows CQ, you're probably about 5% there already. That's all you have to do to actually learn the letters and numbers. The one thing you do not want to do is anything that involves records or tapes. Remember you used to be able to buy code practice tapes? Anybody here have any of those? Throw them away. Here's why. Because you're going to memorize what that sounds like. You're just going to memorize it. It's automatic. You can't help it. And then once you've memorized it, here you are copying this thing perfectly. Boy, look at me. Then you sit down and try to copy something on the air. Back in the old days, take a test and you say, I thought I knew this stuff. I was getting perfect copy. No, you memorized it. That's the problem. So get yourself some different ways of generating Morse code. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. One of them is this kind of cool program here. And it's got the strange name, which I pronounce RoughZXP. As soon as I can get it to come up on the screen here. Oh, there it is. And what RoughZ does is it gives you call signs. It throws one call sign after another on you, and your job is to copy it. And what it will do is you get one call sign right, it'll give you another one a little faster. And if you get that one right, it'll give the next one to you a little faster, until I guarantee you it'll go so fast that you cannot copy it. Every run will frustrate you. Every single one. Hold this, please. So I'm having trouble finding the mouse, so it keeps disappearing. Okay. And do an initial speed of 20. Let's get started. I don't think so, baby. How about 10? Can you do that? Yeah, I don't think so. Let's try something nice and slow. And what it does, it just goes faster and faster and faster until it goes faster than you can possibly copy. By the way, you can't copy anything over 20 words per minute by hand. You just can't. Well, you can for a little bit, maybe for about a minute, before you come up and say, ow, my arm. So what you're going to have to do if you want to improve your code speed is you are going to have to learn how to type. Who knows how to type? If anybody doesn't know how to type? Okay, well the few of you who don't know how to type, and everyone here, come on, everyone here spends all day long dealing with texting and typing, and that's just how it is anymore. If you want to go much above 20 words a minute, you're going to have to copy. As they used to say on the mill, you've got to type it out. There's just no other way it can be done. If you find another way to let me know, because I've never been able to figure that out. So the third way, and I know we have a lot of contesters here in the room, so for you, I present Morse Runner, and this is another free download. And with Morse Runner, what happens is that you get your own personal radio contest. So let's see here. I've got my call set to WB9LBI, CW speed 30, it's probably a little bit too fast, basically slow it down a bit. And I've got the settings all there, and I can say, let's have my own personal radio contest. And all I have to do is, just like a radio contest, you send CQ. And just like the California QSO party, nothing happens. That's why I only got 1 point out of the thing. I would set this thing up for 30 minutes, you know, and eat a sandwich in one hand, and have my own personal radio contest with my own personal pileups going on. And I never once had to worry about the antenna blowing down, or any of the usual problems, or getting rained out, or the rig blowing a tube, or something like that. This is how you can do this, and of course, like the other program, you can set up and you can set yourself up for QRN, QRM. You can have fading, you can have flutter, you have my personal favorite, lids. Don't know how to do a contest. And this is how you would actually go about having a radio contest. And all these three things that you can do, these three programs, are completely free. You can download them tonight. You can get started with on CW. It don't matter. It doesn't matter how good you are or how good that you think you are. Thank you. That was did-a-did-a-did. That was an AR pro sign that we heard. They're all free. And even if you're pretty good, you can still use them to practice and get better. And that is what I think is one of the great things, 73, is one of the great things about CW. Because if you want another challenge in ham radio, if you're bored with what you've been doing, and you like something that's, something new, something that presents a little bit of a hill that you have to climb, something that you have to overcome, just resolve your code speed by 5 more words per minute, and you've got it. You don't have to buy a new rig. You don't need a big, huge tower. Sorry, Tom. You don't need a big antenna. You don't need the 1,500 watt minimum amplifier. Sorry, James. All you need is a little bit of practice here. That's all you got to do for a nice Morse code challenge. I think I've got one more slide for you here. Let me check. Yeah, as it turns out, I do. I got one more for you. Hey, look, I got it on screen. Some whole new translations. HPE is hope. ES, dit, that means and. It's a lot easier than saying AND. Looking is pretty common. FWD for forward. WID, with, that's what we say for with. Once again, we're just saving a couple of dits there, but it gets the job done. 80 meters for those of you on the phone bands who are confused. No, it's not up near 4.4 megahertz. 80 meters is the 100 kilohertz segment between 3.5 and 3.6. That's you will find all your regional CW operators on there. Unless you want to get on 40 or 20, if the bands are open, and there isn't these long fluorescent tubes causing S9Q or M on the band. NW is now, HV have, WK is weak. Oh, and is in there twice, what do you know? Oh, you're very redundant. VY is very, GE is good evening. CU is pretty obvious. You probably use that in your textbook, but CUL is see you later. And 73, as we all know, is best regards. This is, this EE at the end, that is right there a shortcut for, well, you know how a shave and a haircut goes, dit, 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 dit. We're too lazy to even do that. We just give it the dit, dit. I mean, that's all we do. And at the end of the QSO, at the end of the conversation, it goes something like this. And I'm QRT. Thank you very much. Mr. Bob, I knew you had questions. What can I tell you?
Well, I'm just curious, when you were calling CQ on there, you would give your call, and then instead of saying over, you would go test. Do you do that usually, or do you just...
You mean K? Oh, test? Oh, that's right, TEST. Right, so when you're doing a contest, we don't even spell out the contest. You know, we assume that if you're on this frequency, you know what contests are going on. So we just come out with TEST because it's rhythmic. Da, 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 da. It's very rhythmic. Matter of fact, someone sat down once and figured out that the most rhythmic thing you can put down is Ben's best bent wire. On CW, it sounds like your buddy Rich on the drums. Let me tell you. It just rolls off the key. It sounds great. Just the word bend. Da 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 da. And the whole sentence goes on like that. So yeah, when in a contest, you usually don't even say which contest it is. You just say test. Da 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 da. And if it's a different contest, so what? The exchanges are all the same. Your call sign 599, some number that you made up. There's another point in your log. Yes, sir.
Bill, there's another piece of software also free called Just Learn Morse Code, which is similar to that first one you had up there. It also has the Farnsworth timing and Cox method But you can cut text, blocks of text out of other documents, put it in there, and it will play that back to you. I found that rather easy to use.
That's pretty much what I did here with G4FO1. I took a piece of text and I just said CQ, 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 and I said there's an option there to save as an audio file. And so that's what you do. It's one extra step. I had to put it in a text file, then read that text file, but it generated it as audio. So you go to the latest news site, or I don't know, there's somebody who went out there and they made the entire novel, The War of the Worlds, in 20 words per minute Morse code. For your light reading pleasure. An invasion from Mars would almost be better. So, but you mentioned the Farnsworth spacing. It's kind of interesting. If you learn a letter in Morse code, once you learn that letter, it barely matters how fast it's said. 5 words per minute, 25 words per minute, 30 words a minute, you will recognize it. The thing that you have to do in Morse code is you stretch it out. Because what really takes time is the time for your brain to actually have to process this. And so the idea behind the Farnsworth spacing is you send a letter at any speed, and then you allow adequate padding at the end, so it effectively slows it down to some other speed where you're actually copying. And it actually works out quite well. The idea that you can take any letter that you know and send it at 30 words a minute, you got it, is just kind of amazing. Oh yes, there are also Morse code translator programs you can get out there. The people who bring me Morse one are called one that uses what's called a Bayesian algorithm to try and figure it out, but otherwise that's the only one that really works, because nobody has a steady enough fist to be able to the only computer generated code will work on these things. You know, you try to copy somebody who's sending by hand, even if they're using paddles, you know, they'll get a couple of words here and there, but otherwise it's just a jumble. Because people are slower, sort of faster, and they speed up and they slow down. They don't have the spacing quite right, so it uses a predictive algorithm. So, any other questions? For anyone who's interested, I encourage you to see you on there. I've been looking forward to having a QSO with you on there one of these days. And with what you've seen, there's no reason why you can't go home and for $0 get started tonight. I'll see you on the air.
Bill, thanks very much. We really appreciate that interesting talk on CW, and as Bill said, hopefully we'll see a few more of you on the air. Thank you everybody for coming this evening. I appreciate you being here. Hope you enjoyed the meeting, and we'll look forward to seeing you in November.